When you're confined to a place where the distinction of time fades away, the world you once knew continues to tick forward. Chuck, the caveman, was once a time-obsessed executive at FedEx. He was very good at what he did, a reliable and efficient man. He jetted across the globe, troubleshooting urgent package transfers. He personally FedExed a clock from Memphis to Russia, highlighting the sluggishness of the delivery, particularly for crucial packages. Close to the holiday shipping deadline, a truck became stranded in Moscow. Chuck sprang into action, rushing to the scene and efficiently resolving the issue, ensuring the timely delivery of the shipment. Chuck quickly leaves a loving message for Kelly before heading back to Memphis, and also makes a note to schedule a dental appointment. On the flight home, Chuck learns from his friend Stan that his wife, Mary, has cancer. Chuck's tooth continued to bother him during Christmas dinner. Kelly gifted him her grandfather's railroad watch, containing her photo inside. Chuck has to leave for Asia. Before boarding the plane, he surprised Kelly with a small box to be opened on New Year's Eve upon his return as he promised. As Chuck awakened from turbulence on the feeder flight over the Pacific Ocean, he sensed unease among the pilots. The plane had deviated south due to weather, straying 200 miles off course. Chuck headed to the restroom to wash his face when suddenly the door swung open. Albert, a co-pilot, rushed to assist him, offering an oxygen mask as Chuck buckled up. Albert informed Chuck they might need to ditch the plane. Peering into the cockpit, Chuck realized the pilots were struggling to maintain control amidst the violent shaking. He unbuckled to retrieve the railroad watch and his life vest. The FedEx cargo slid towards the cockpit from the commotion. The plane hurtled towards the ocean. Emerging from the water's surface, the ceiling unable to withstand the ocean's relentless pressure, the roof torn apart. Chuck frantically opened his emergency raft. It became entangled with the plane until the rope finally ripped. He escapes the sinking plane and climbs onto the life raft just as the engine explodes behind him. Gripping the side ropes of the raft, he faces the storm's fury in the dark night, enduring intense rain and pounding waves. Chuck loses consciousness in the storm but wakes up on a beach after it subsides. Realizing he won't need his beeper anymore, he finds the watch still with him, though it has stopped ticking. Chuck gathers nearby FedEx packages and calls out hello to the deserted island. After receiving no response, he dries off, removes his socks, and attempts to signal for assistance by making a help sign with his feet in the sand. During the first night, he wakes to a thumping sound. The next day, he finds most of his help sign washed away by the ocean, so he collects large tree trunks to create a sturdier one. Chuck continues to collect FedEx packages that wash ashore. While hearing the thumping sound, he discovers it's a coconut. Chuck struggles to crack it open until he finds a sharp rock, finally accessing the coconut water. Exploring the island, Chuck finds a cave with a narrow opening but receives no response after calling out. As he walks back, his feet bleed from the reefs and rocks. Spotting a tall cliff, he retrieves the last FedEx package with a pair of wings. Using a sharp rock and cloth from his pants, he makes shoes to protect his injured feet and uses a cane to traverse the island. Upon reaching the highest cliff, he spots nothing but the endless ocean. On the other side, Chuck sees a man in the ocean. He rushes over, only to find Albert's dead body. He retrieves the corpse and tries on Albert's shoes, finding them too small. He discovers a flashlight and a family photo in the wallet. Chuck places the photo back and buries Albert. Sitting by the shore, Chuck wears customized sandals and gazes at Kelly's photo with the flashlight. While exploring, he finds a leaf containing water, inspiring him to collect water in a makeshift coconut water bottle. Chuck's initial attempts to spear fish prove futile. At night, he spots a flashing light in the distance and tries to attract attention by waving his flashlight. The next morning, he patches the raft up and sets out to find the passing boat. Chuck faces relentless waves and is struck by sharp coral reefs, causing injuries and significant bleeding. Defeated by the waves, he limps back to shore. As a thunderstorm engulfs the island, Chuck crawls into the narrow opening of the cave to seek refuge. Inside, he drinks from a small puddle formed by the rain before losing consciousness, leaving the flashlight on until its battery dies. In the morning, Chuck assesses his severe wound and decides it's time to open the packages washed ashore. Among them are cassette tapes, a pile of divorce papers, a volleyball, ice arena skates, and a dress too small for him. Using the mesh from the dress, Chuck creates a fishing net and catches a tiny fish, which he eats as sashimi, likely his first meal in almost a week. Spotting a crab, he successfully hunts it with a sharpened spear, but finds the raw crab leg unpalatable. Realizing the need for fire, Chuck resorts to friction with wood, enduring agonizing pain in his palms throughout the night. He turns to coconuts until his toothache flares up. Chuck persists in making fire until he cuts deeply into his hand. His frustration boils over, throwing the volleyball and screaming in distress before washing his wounds in the ocean. Chuck notices the volleyball and makes a face from the bloody palm print. Carefully placing it on a stump, he returns to making fire, stealing awkward glances at it and asking if it has a match. Encouraged by its presence, Chuck finally succeeds in creating fire, shouting in triumph like King Kong. That night, Chuck enjoys his first cooked meal on the island, crab legs, as he talks to Wilson, the volleyball. With rain approaching, Chuck and Wilson seek shelter in a cave. Chuck calculates their location, realizing the daunting odds of rescue in the vast search area. The next day, Chuck's toothache worsens, reminding him of the root canal he needs upon his return, a promise made to Kelly. Chuck confides in Wilson, noting Kelly's beauty surpasses even her portrait. Unable to endure the agony any longer, he uses ice skates and a rock to extract his tooth, trembling with fear. With a final surge of resolve, Chuck knocks out his tooth and collapses unconscious. He skillfully pierces a fish with a spear, consuming it raw with a stoic expression. 4 years passed, Chuck has become a skilled caveman. As another thunderous night approaches, he sleeps beside Kelly's photo. Chuck has fashioned a calendar on a rock to mark time, and Wilson's hair now matches Chuck's vibe. One day, a loud noise jolts Chuck awake. He carefully checks the surroundings. He finds a section of a portable toilet. Chuck and Wilson stare up at the new guest, and an idea sparks as the wind blows over the plastic. Using his refined survival skills, Chuck chops down trees to prepare for a raft. After calculating, he confirms the number of ropes needed for the project. In a month and a half, high tides and favorable winds will provide the best opportunity to sail. Short of rope materials, Chuck recalls a test Wilson had challenged him last year, potentially saving his life. He climbs to the highest cliff to retrieve the last rope. The year before, Chuck wanted to end his life. Wilson suggested testing the rope's strength first. Luckily, Chuck listened. Otherwise, he would have fallen into the ocean and smashed his body on the rocks. An argument with Wilson over leaving the island ensues, leading Chuck to kick him out. Soon after, he regrets it and calls for Wilson to come back. Chuck rushes out to find Wilson hiding behind a rock, pouting. Back in the cave, Chuck patches up Wilson's face with fresh blood, reconciling their friendship. Wilson is used to it now. Chuck constructs a wind vane and wraps up the last FedEx package. With only the right weather conditions needed, he acknowledges his fear and asks Wilson if he's scared too, understanding the journey's enormity. Chuck carves his final words onto a rock, leaving a message of love for Kelly in case he doesn't survive. With the wind finally in their favor, Chuck and Wilson waste no time. Chuck reassures Wilson as he pushes the raft into the water, venturing out into the open sea. Passing through the first few waves successfully, Chuck braces himself as a particularly strong wave looms ahead. With precise timing, he releases the sail, harnessing the wind's power to propel them across the crest of the wave. He screams with joy. Paddling away from their former prison, they look back one last time, leaving behind the island that trapped them for 4 years. Encountering rain, Chuck quickly collects rainwater in his coconut water bottle. In the pitch-dark night, a whale surfaces by their raft and looks at castaways. During the day, Chuck skillfully catches fish for sustenance, but as night falls, an intense storm brews. Clinging tightly to Wilson, they brace themselves as the sail detaches and flies off into the tempest. Chuck and Wilson struggle to weather the turbulent night at sea. Wilson dozes off into the ocean. The whale splashes water onto the raft, jolting Chuck awake. Chuck scans the raft and realizes that Wilson is gone. He dives into the ocean and grabs onto a rope attached to the raft to steady himself. The rope proves too short, and Chuck struggles to maintain control. Desperation mounts as Chuck sees Wilson drifting farther away. He catches onto the rope and screams for Wilson. Unable to tread any longer, and with a heavy heart, Chuck realizes he must let go of Wilson, the physical companion who kept him sane. Overwhelmed with grief and guilt, Chuck continues to apologize to Wilson relentlessly, his cries echoing in the emptiness of the ocean. As Chuck drifts in and out of sleep, he's awakened once again by the whale. A large cargo boat passes by, sounding its alarm. Chuck reaches out his hand, desperately repeating Kelly's name into the wind. Kelly picks up the call. She faints immediately after. Chuck, now groomed and slender, boards the plane bound for Memphis, where a ceremony awaits. Stan hands him ice, a luxury he hasn't had in a long time. He learns Kelly thought he was dead and moved on. Chuck also apologizes for not being there when Stan's wife passed away. At the FedEx office, Chuck's return is celebrated. However, instead of meeting Kelly, Chuck is greeted by Mr. Big, Kelly's husband. Big explains that Kelly needs time to process this. Chuck watches from afar as Kelly cries. The FedEx team and Chuck's friends celebrate his miraculous return. Ironically, the celebration is filled with seafood and king crab. He idly flicks a lighter, marveling at how easily it ignites a flame. At night, he lies on the floor of the hotel room, switching the lamp on and off, lost in thought as he gazes at the railroad watch containing Kelly's photo, reminding him of a time when his world was vastly different. Chuck decides to take a cab. With hesitant steps, he approaches Kelly's door. Kelly opens the door immediately, as if she had been waiting for him all along. Chuck is enveloped in a warm hug from Kelly, a gesture that feels both strange and comforting. Inside, they share small talk and catch up on each other's lives. Chuck returns the railroad watch to Kelly, despite her initial refusal. The watch stopped working, and much of the photo faded. Kelly shares with Chuck the compiled information about his incident. Despite the lack of closure, Kelly's unwavering belief that Chuck was still alive. Chuck confesses to Kelly that he regrets getting on the plane and leaving her that day. Kelly takes him to see their old car and returns the key to him. Kelly reminds Chuck of his promise to return that day. In a bittersweet farewell, Kelly leans in and kisses him before he drives away. As Chuck's car hits the street, Kelly watches from the end of the driveway, unable to see him anymore. She runs out and calls his name. Chuck immediately backs up the car, opening the door as they embrace in the pouring rain. Kelly confesses that she always knew Chuck was alive, despite everyone telling her to move on. He's the love of her life. Chuck gently tells Kelly that she needs to go home, and she nods, understanding this is the end of their chapter. Chuck opens up to Stan about his harrowing experience on the island. The unexpected turn of events, with the tide bringing him a sail, defied his logic, and gave him a second chance at life. However, amidst his return to civilization, he grapples with the devastating loss of Kelly once again. Chuck purchases a new Wilson. Chuck sets out to deliver the package with the wings, finally locating the owner's address. Finding nobody home, Chuck leaves a heartfelt note expressing his gratitude. As he drives away, he pauses at a crossroad to consult his map, only to be approached by a woman who offers to help him with directions. She drives off. Chuck notices the wing logo on her truck, realizing that he has crossed paths with the owner of the life-saving package after 4 long years. Standing at the intersection of possibilities, Chuck's clock restarts, marking the beginning of a new chapter in his life. For upcoming content, click like, pound that subscribe, and hit notification. Thank you for watching.